Sports Update is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service. Moving forward.
And welcome live into DETV Sports as we are back here on Super Wildcard Monday. We are fresh in the NFL playoffs. We hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I believe our second show of 2025, or we back for the first time, but our first time, right? So Happy New Year, everybody. I know if it's too late to say that here, we're all the way into the second week of January. But Dennis back in the studio with us. Matthew Maurer, we'll hear from him in a second, and Jason McCall. First off, wanted to say happy 40th for Jason McCall there over the weekend. Big weekend for Jason. He got, not only did he turn 40, big celebration for him there over the weekend, so we want to wish him a happy birthday. And then, of course, his Ravens got the job done against the Steelers. Back-to-back wins now over Pittsburgh since he sat in this chair about a month or two ago and took the heat from some of the DETV crew here. So 2 straight wins for them over the Steelers. I'm sure he's feeling good. I told him, he said he was going to think about maybe sending a video in here for us to play tonight. Not sure if Dennis has that yet. But again, we're looking for Jason to get back next week because his team's got a big matchup that we're going to touch on here in a little bit with the Bills and the Ravens. Man, wish we had Jason talk about that one. That's going to be a good one. But Matthew, here we are back. First show of 2025. How we feeling?
Good.
Get ready to go.
I'm ready to go, man. I'm good. You know, little tears. My team ain't in it. But, you know, got to think about the get back, so.
That's right. Again, yeah. And Niners dealing with some injuries, though. Again, looking to get back to things next year. A lot of maybe a quarterback. It's going to be Brock Purdy next year for you guys. What do you think? I heard some Kirk Cousins rumblings there in the offseason. I'm all about I would re-sign Purdy. I'd give him the money, I guess, and let it ride. So we'll see what happens.
I'm going Cousins. So.
I tell you that, though, Ricky Pearsall, nice last game to end his rookie season there with a big game for the Niners in Week 18. But we got a lot to talk about today, Matthew. Super Wildcard Weekend recap. We are in the books. 1 game left here for the NFL playoffs in round number 1. The coaching cycle, I know you saw on your Facebook a little bit earlier, you had some words on the Gerard Mayo cycle and everything that's going on with him and the Patriots. They announced Mike Vrabel as their new head coach today. They had his press conference at 12 o'clock. We'll talk about that. Cowboys, an hour or two ago, letting go of Mike McCarthy after keeping him in the building and not allowing him to interview with other teams, and then they just let him go about a week later. So we'll talk about that. Steelers go down. Who's going to be their quarterback next year? Both of them are free agents. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. What are they going to do? And then we'll talk about, obviously, the Ravens, the Eagles, and some of these teams going forward. But, Matthew, I want to start with that first game on Saturday. Texans home underdogs to the Chargers. Not a lot of people gave the Texans, a chance to win that game, even though they were at home. Only, I think, a 3.5 or 3-point underdog in that game. C.J. Stroud dealing with a little bit of a rough offensive line play this year. They lost Tank Dell. They lose Diggs for the season. Playing kind of poor football coming into the playoffs, and the Chargers, one of the best defenses in the league coming into the Super Wildcard Weekend. They had won some games. They really turned things around from a season ago. They were favorites, as I mentioned, on the road in this game, and the Texans just take them out. Again, we're going to go through kind of our picks going forward, and I'm not going to lie, I had the Chargers winning this game. I know we're big fans of C.J. Stroud, but the way they were playing, the defense has been good, but the offense has been stagnant, not really getting anything going the last 4 or 5 weeks, especially with Joe Mixon. All they had is Nico Collins. But in that game on Saturday, Matthew, it was the defense. Texans defense came to play. Justin Herbert had 3 interceptions coming into the game all season. Yeah. He left that game with 4 in the game against that defense. They really had him in some fits there with that Texans D, able to return one for a touchdown. Texans look good. Won a playoff game last year in the first year and rookie year for C.J. Stroud. Lose to the Ravens, and they come out this year as a home underdog, get another playoff victory for DeMeco Ryans, who should have been the coach of the year last year.
That's a fact.
So what do you think about the Texans here? More about the Texans or more about the Chargers after this one?
I mean, I think this is a big feather in the cap for the Texans. I think I wasn't big on the Chargers this year. I just didn't like the way the team's constructed, and I think it kind of reared its ugly head in this game. I wasn't big on the wide-out play. I think they had some nice pieces to move forward. I just don't think it was playoff worthy. Yeah. And I think it showed itself. And the fact, the running game was not that great this year for them. They struggled to establish the run in this game. And look, Joe Mixon definitely played out of his mind, which I think really helped C.J. Stroud. And I think that's been the problem with Joe Mixon throughout his career. He's had to overcome poor O-line play. The Bengals didn't have a great O-line when he was there. and he's always been a guy that's been able to try to make a little bit more out of pass catching. But in this game in particular, he ran really well between the tackles.
Yeah, and he got them going, especially in the second half. We know if we had Jason here, he'd talk a little bit about Greg Roman, his former offensive coordinator with the Baltimore Ravens. And you mentioned it, run game great for the Chargers early in the year. J.K. Dobbins goes down, goes in IR. They really struggled through that middle part of the stretch. But the big thing that you just mentioned was wide receiver play. Outside of Ladd McConkey, they have no weapons whatsoever. Could not get the fall down the field. Offensive line could not contain that pass rush. Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson had a field day there against the Chargers. Texans pressured Herbert at 50% rate. Again, Los Angeles, again, was also shut down in the run game. He only completed 3 of 15 passes when pressured for 100 yards, 2 interceptions, and 4 sacks for Justin Herbert in that game last night. Nico Collins set a new Texans playoff record, 122 receiving yards. Great to see him back and healthy. He's one of the best receivers in the game. C.J. Stroud had a perfect passer rating when connecting with Nico Collins. But again, this standing out to me, the whole thing of this was the defense for the Texans. I mean, they were fantastic here at home. And if they can get a pass rush like this and able to play man coverage on the back end with some of those talented guys in the secondary, Jalen Petrie, obviously Bullard, and then Derek Stingley, who's been one of the best corners in the league all season. If that defense can pin those ears back and get after the quarterback with that pass rush, one of the best in the league, who knows? Maybe they can give a run next week to Kansas City, but they are big underdogs in the game against the Chiefs. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But Matthew, I want to get your opinion on Justin Herbert now. Back-to-back, he's been in the playoffs twice.
Yep.
The first game, he was up 27-0 against the Jaguars at the half. They lose that game. Largest comeback in NFL playoff history for Jacksonville. He's 0-1. Comes in here as another favorite, albeit on the road, but he's a favorite in this game. And again, not a lot of weapons. We talked about that. So hard for him. Offensive line played horrible in this game. Couldn't get the run game going. So not all his fault, but a really poor performance. 4 interceptions, sacked a bunch of times again. Struggling offensive line. But what are your thoughts on Justin Herbert going forward? 0-2 in the playoffs. 2 poor performances. Again, you think it's mostly on him? Not a lot of help, though, with that team he had this past week.
I mean, I think this is one of the things that every young quarterback, you got to figure out what kind of guy you got. I think some guys, we don't know what Herbert is right now. I mean, we know he has the talent. What we don't know is he a guy like Jared Goff who's going to need everything, or is he a guy that can make something out of nothing, or is he a guy that just needs a little bit of pieces here? We don't know what he is right now. I know he's talented. I still have stock in him. I still think he's got, I think he still has the talent to become a really good QB at this level. But, I mean, look, postseason success is a big thing that you got to have as a quarterback. And I actually think that's like one of the reasons why I continue, even though Stroud had a bad year, is one of the reasons why I continue to still believe in Stroud as a talent.
Yeah, me too. And again, Bryce Young also playing well again, off topic here, but both of those guys playing well as of late. So let me ask you about the Texans now. They get a win here. Defense is playing really well. D'Amico Ryans, they brought a lot of energy, but now they got to pack up and they got to go on the road to Kansas City to a team that's won 2 straight Super Bowls. They're almost, I believe, 9.5-point underdogs in this game on the road in Kansas City, who had that first round bye. You giving the Texans any remote chance to win this game or even keep it close? How do you think that one's going to go?
I think it all depends on Joe Mixon, honestly. If Joe Mixon can get separation and really control the tempo of the offense a little bit more, I think that would give Stroud the chance to really pick apart the defense. I think Stroud is talented enough to do that. But again, I mean, that's going to be the major part for the Texans. They got to get that run game going. And more importantly, they got to get somebody else other than Nico Collins involved in the offense. Yeah,
no doubt. Especially, not a lot of, we talked about Ladd McConkey being the only pass catcher for the Chargers.
Right.
Well, Nico Collins, one of the only big playmakers there besides Joe Mixon offensively for the Texans. Again, missing Tank Dell and obviously Stephon Diggs. So tough there offensively for Houston. And again, now going to go on the road against Kansas City. I think it's going to be maybe not a defensive game, but I think the defense is going to be the big part in that one. I think Kansas City's defense has been not as good as last year, but solid. And the Texans, after what we saw this past weekend, could be a good game. So the Texans can maybe keep it close.
Yep.
We'll see. Maybe, obviously, if they can pull it out late. But I kind of like the Texans with the points. I know last year they had the Ravens in the second round. Did work out for them in that game, but it's all about the defense. The Texans defense can play like they did. Obviously, they were at home. Now they got to go on the road. It's a whole different story. But if the pass rush has been the only thing that's been able to disrupt Mahomes in his career in the playoffs, and they lost that Super Bowl to the Bucs, to the Patriots in the AFC Championship. The only way that he's ever able to lose is if you pressure him constantly all game. Houston's got the front on the defensive side to do it. We'll see if they can. That's a whole different story. That matchup next Saturday night. Or Saturday afternoon. Ravens, they beat the Steelers. No Jason McCall to highlight it for us today. 28-14, though. Yep. Game was never really in doubt, Matthew. They entered the week, did the Ravens, scoring 30-plus points in each of its last 4 games. They were red hot coming in. all wins for the Ravens in those 4. Pittsburgh, though, they stumbled into the playoffs. They lost 4 straight games coming into it. So 2 teams obviously in different directions heading in. Steelers, big underdogs, I believe double digits, 9.5 to 10 into this game on the road at M&T Bank Stadium. And it was the run game for Baltimore. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson dominated this one. 300 rush yards, 464 yards of total offense. Again, no tackles for TJ Watt in this game. That's just something you don't see ever. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry combined for 267 of those yards. Matthew, again, this one never in doubt. Ravens dominated this contest from start to finish. They've now won 2 straight over Pittsburgh, a team that's kind of almost had their number historically there in the regular season with Lamar Jackson versus Mike Tomlin. So where do you want to take this one? The Ravens playing very well. They're going to go take on Josh Allen and the Bills. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But were you more impressed with how the Ravens looked? More about the Steelers, in my opinion. I think they've just played so poorly coming in. I didn't expect them really to win this game. I thought maybe they had a chance to cover the 10. Weren't able to do that. Didn't show a lot of life. Didn't show a lot of energy in this one, especially that whole first half. So what do you take out of this one? Is it more about the Ravens, more about the Steelers? Because I'll tell you what, Mike Tomlin's catching a lot of heat right now for a coach that has never had a losing record. He's now lost 4 straight times in the playoffs, been down double digits in each of those 4 games in the playoffs. But then again, he's never had a quarterback, even a competent one, in these last 4 years. So your thoughts, is it Mike Tomlin's fault? Does he deserve to go? A lot of people are saying that 50-50 here split. How do you feel about the Steelers and the Ravens after what you saw on Saturday?
I mean, honestly, this is going to maybe it's going to add fuel to the fire, but I think he's at a crossroads of his career and coaching, kind of like what Andy Reid had at Philadelphia, where
yeah, that's a good comparison.
For whatever reason, there's this identity crisis in the Steelers, and the problem is what we're watching. The defense has been the calling card of the Steelers.
Absolutely.
The defense has not been Steeler-esque for a while now.
No.
Besides Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick, there's not a lot of talent on the defensive side for the Pittsburgh Steelers, at least not as we've seen them throughout our lives. They usually have been a stout top 10 defense. Yeah. It's really not like that with them. And then I think the other problem is they've been doing patchwork with the QB play. Yeah. And, you know, I give Russell Wilson a lot of credit. He came in, he played like a vet, he did well. But at this point, they need a franchise QB. Yeah. I mean, they need somebody they can invest in or get themselves a really exceptional running back and then pair him with maybe a veteran QB. I don't know if Russell Wilson is the answer. I honestly think Mike Tomlin's need to go. I don't see him as somebody who, at this point, I think he's done all he can do. And I think it might be addition by subtraction. I think he'll go to another place. I don't think he's going to be unemployed very long.
No, absolutely not.
I don't think this is a indication on him being a bad coach.
Agreed.
As much as this, I think this is just, you can only do something the same way so many times before you say, well, let's maybe change things up. And I think that's where the Steelers are. And I think if Mike Tomlin's honest, I think he's going to have to start saying, maybe I need to make a move.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I agree with every single word you said there. I mean, he's been one of the best coaches over his tenure. To not ever have a losing season is just a remarkable feat. So, again, congratulations to what he's been able to do. But like you said, you gave that Andy Reid comparison. I thought that was a fantastic comparison, right? Because Andy Reid, 3 straight NFC Championship losses with the Eagles, couldn't really get over the hump. And, you know, a little bit different. Mike Tomlin not able to get out of the first round.
Right.
But, again, Andy Reid had some more talent in Philadelphia than Mike Tomlin's had offensively, at least, in Pittsburgh. But, again, I don't think it's anything against Mike Tomlin. Just a change of scenery I think would be great for both sides. And, again, you're right. You can't expect a coach, especially one I think as good as Mike Tomlin, you know, to do maybe higher expectations a little bit. You want to get at least a playoff victory in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, I think they haven't won a playoff game since 2017.
Right.
But again, when you have if you want to go through the quarterbacks, when they had Ben Roethlisberger in his last year, he had already fallen off. But they started that season 11-0. They were 11-0, lost that playoff game to the Browns, though, absolutely destroyed. And then after that, it's been as you mentioned, a quarterback carousel over there in Pittsburgh. They spent the first-round pick. They're a very good drafting organization over the years, but they spent that 16th overall pick on Kenny Pickett a few years ago, first rounder, right? That was their first round pick. 2 years, and he was on a different team. That's not even something you see too often.
No.
So that was kind of a mistake there for them. But again, they were trying to, as you mentioned, patch the holes, right? They bring in Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator, who was fired as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons because of what he did on offense. He wasn't good at getting those playmakers the ball. Bijan Robinson was an average back for Atlanta last year. Look what he did this year. I mean, it's unbelievable. Drake London, average last year, unbelievable this year.
Top 5 guys.
Exactly. So you look at that, and you bring in Arthur Smith, and you have Terrell Austin as the defensive coordinator coordinator over those last couple of years, and the defense just hasn't been the same, as you mentioned. It as their calling card. The Super Bowl 40 champions, it was because of the defense. I mean, you think Pittsburgh Steelers, you think historically defense. I think Terrell Austin has to be out as defensive coordinator. I mean, I don't like firing a coordinator after 1 year, but Arthur Smith, they had a little bit of success, but you saw down the stretch, they just couldn't score points. And I know it's Russell Wilson excited, I don't have too many weapons, but the offensive line was average, was okay. They had 2 solid running backs in Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. You have George Pickens, and again, just couldn't get anything done there, especially down the stretch. So didn't like the Arthur Smith hire at the time for them as the offensive coordinator. We'll see. I'm sure he'll be back there next year. But a lot of questions to figure out, and it has to do with the quarterback situation. Both of those guys are free agents. It's been said before the game they'd like to have Russell Wilson back. I don't know how you could say that after what they did down the stretch. I personally wouldn't see that happening. So what do you think? Is it going to be Justin Fields, free agent, Russell Wilson, free agent, Kirk Cousins is on the trade block?
They got to blow it up. They got to blow it up. And I honestly think another guy that's got to go is Najee Harris.
Yeah, I think he'll be maybe unless they resign. But yeah, I think he'll be gone.
To me, he's a below average back. I don't think he's a real starting running back. I mean, he doesn't do a lot with his carries. I mean, he's averaging I want to say a putrid 3 yards a carry. And he's not even a guy that does compound carries. He's not like a Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon has always had statistically low yards per carry, but when Melvin would get to 20, 22, he would have 100 yards. Najee's not that guy. That's not what he does. And I think why they juggled Warren the way they have the past couple years is because Najee does things. I think Najee's a great back for a time in which you just gave the ball to the back and that was all they were expecting you to do. But in this era where you got to do pass catching, you got to do blocking, it's a lot different. Najee Harris, again, no disrespect, I think he's a serviceable back. I just don't think that he's a guy long term for them. I think they got to let him go and really start to rebuild that whole offense and really get better linebacker play. I think that's been one of the things for them that's been hurting. I mean, you got Watt, but other than that, and Fitzpatrick, like I said, I just don't see a lot over the way. And let me also give, Joey Porter Jr. has done well too. But, I mean, if we're being honest, it just isn't your typical Steelers. Yeah,
and again, you look at the talents there on defense. I think that maybe a scheme change, a defensive coordinator, I think that has to change. When DJ Watt has 0 tackles in a playoff game, something's got to change because that's not the fault of him for sure. So schematically, something's got to change defensively for the Pittsburgh and definitely offensively, whether that be a new quarterback or some weapons, at receiver. They're going to have to get some stuff going. Najee Harris is a free agent. Maybe he'll be a Dallas Cowboy next year. You never know. He'll be a free agent this offseason. Well, we got to talk about this one, Matthew. Eagles dominate the Packers here 22-10. Forced that fumble on the opening kickoff, and from there, never looked back. Check out Vic Fangio's defense in this one. They gave up just 4 plays of over 20 yards, and they held Green Bay to 300 yards of total offense. And not only that, you heard of the body bag game from years ago in Philadelphia. Well, they took out Elgton Jenkins, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Weeks. Christian Watson wasn't playing. The Packers were just beat up and had nobody left by the time the fourth quarter was coming around. The Eagles defense limited Jordan Love to 3 of 11, passing for 58 yards and 3 interceptions when he looked down the field of over 10 yards. I mean, they dominated this game, especially defensively. That was something that you highlighted in the offseason, right? The defense last year was atrocious, the worst in the league down the stretch. They lost 10 straight games and then blown out by the Bucs in the first round of the playoffs. Shout out to Dennis. We'll talk about his team a little bit later on. But this year, the defense went from worst to first. Number one in the league. It showed in that game yesterday. They were able to run the football a little bit, but the defense able to take them home. Your takeaways from the Eagles' suffocation of Green Bay at home?
I mean, I just think that the thing that Vic Fangio's done really well is accentuate the physicality of the team. I mean, and I got to be honest with you, Jalen Carter, I don't know how anybody's not excited to watch him. I mean, I think he's going to join his name with some pretty illustrious guys in the Eagles organization. He's got the future look of being a guy that's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler. And probably one of the top guys at his position.
Could have been the top pick in the draft that year, had that Cara incident before the draft.
Yeah, and look, I'll give Jalen Carter a ton of maturity credit because, I mean, he's played with his emotions more under control, more controlled fury with him. And I think, honestly, if we're being this is going to sound, I guess, I'm not trying to take away what the Eagles did, but and a lot of it had to do with the scheme that they ran against Love, but Love, my God, I don't know what. I was worried. I've always been a little worried about Jordan Love because I saw a lot of the holes in him upstairs in the head. I think he's got great size, great arm talent. He's a guy that likes to throw. And Vic Fangio basically said, dude, go ahead and throw. We want you to throw deep. And he took the bait each time. And the one interception,
the Slay interception.
Yeah, I don't really blame him for that. Yeah. But the other one, I don't know who he was throwing to. It was bad, man.
It was really bad. I mean, I think we've been kind of Jordan Love fans. I know I have, especially on the show, especially last year. I thought he was, and I still do. I think he could really be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But you said it yesterday. That was what I took away from him. I mean, these last couple of games down the stretch, he's just missing some throws that he shouldn't miss. And not only that, I mean, you talked about the mental, his pre-snap recognition and him being able to diagnose coverages, I mean, hasn't been there at all. I mean, to not see Bond drop back there into that zone coverage and he threw it straight. I mean, it's just mind-boggling, some of the throws that he made in that game. And again, they were just dropping back, playing, zone defense, and he was just giving them opportunities. It was tough. And I know the Eagles' pass rush is good, but again, I'm a little thrown back with what I've seen out of him down the stretch, and now I'm having internal struggles with what I think of his future. But I'm still a fan, and I don't think Matt LaFleur coached a very good game either. He has been a great coach over the last couple years that he's been there. But again, Josh Jacobs with only 18 carries, 18 touches crazy in this game. I mean, he was
the most effective offensive player they had.
And they had to get that going early. I know they lost the fumble early, but it just seems like they unraveled. Didn't seem like they were ready for this game in Green Bay, that is. And again, when you lose all those guys, all those weapons to injury, it is going to be tough to win. But the Packers defense was phenomenal yesterday.
Yeah,
I mean, they were fantastic. So for the offense to look this poor, again, Packers are a solid team, so the Eagles still looked really good doing it. But the Packers defense showed up yesterday against that Eagles offense.
No, they definitely did, and look, and that's the best takeaway from this. And look, I'm trashing Jordan Love because I just think a lot of what he did came out, and what the fear of him and the decision making that he does on that field. Despite all that, I got to give tremendous credit to Vic Fangio. I got to give tremendous credit to the Eagles' defensive scheme. And I mean, look, I'm still a little worried about parts of the Eagles' offense. Not Barkley, of course not. And I'm interested to see what happens in a scenario where they need Jalen Hurts to be a little bit more assertive offensively. I mean, he takes the throws that are given to him. And look, I haven't seen him yet this year really be in a situation where he's got to be more aggressive. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens in that scenario. For the Eagles, this is a great win, great start to their Super Bowl push. Obviously, I'm one of the people that thought that Barkley should get MVP.
Yeah.
He probably won't. But again, the way the Eagles are looking right now, they look really strong, and they look like a team that, if everything continues to go their way, I don't think we're not going to see them in the Super Bowl. I think they're going to be there.
I hope you're right. And again, just to the Jalen point, after missing, I think 2 or 3 games before that, that's what I was looking for. Was there going to be some rust? I thought he played, pretty well for the most part. Again, you go back to that, or at least watching the tape, and I think Dan Orlovsky did a good job describing this morning, was that there weren't a lot of options to go. The thing that he took away from that game was with Kellen Moore was kind of the scheme of the offense. I mean, they were covered up down the field the entire game. Obviously, the offense and Saquon got going a little bit, but are they going to be able to scheme guys open in the next round? Because they're going to have to do that when you're playing the Rams and the Vikings, who we'll talk about a little bit later tonight. Right. Those are much better, almost as good defense as what the Packers had going on. So we'll see if they can come up with a better scheme, get some guys open down the field maybe next week. But again, we'll see. I thought Jalen looked okay in his return, but that's the question that everybody's going to be asking, is when they get in a potential shootout, if they do, I know the defense has been good, how are they going to respond when the defense gives up 21 points? Can they outscore a team like Detroit, who is the best offense we've seen in some time? So that's going to be hopefully a matchup we can see down the road. Well, Matthew, your top quarterback in this year's draft, Jaden Daniels, continues his stellar run as a rookie. Goes into Tampa, takes down the Bucs on the last-second doink field goal, 23-20.
The doinker.
268 yards for him, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Also led them in rushing with 36 yards. First rookie to lead his team in passing and rushing during an NFL playoff win in the NFL history. It all comes down to that Baker Mayfield fumble with Jalen McMillan back in their own 20-yard line. That kind of lost them the game. That was the big point. Scary Terry finally on a big stage in the playoffs, able to show what he can can do. Such a talented receiver. 7 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown for him. Baker was phenomenal in the game, almost a perfect passer rating, but it did not matter as Daniels and the Commanders able to get it. He's the first Washington rookie quarterback since Hall of Famer Sammy Baugh in 1937 to win a playoff game in the franchise's first season in Washington. So, Jaden Daniels looked good last night. The legend continues to grow.
Yep.
But now they got to pack up, Matthew, and they're heading to Detroit to take on the Lions on the road next week at Ford Field. They're 9.5-point underdogs in that game. What do you expect to see out of the Commanders? Do they have a chance against the Detroit Lions the way Jaden Daniels is playing? The defense has been solid, but mostly about Daniels.
I don't think it's about Daniels. I think it's the defense.
There you go.
Defense has to keep Detroit around 20.
Oh, man.
Just to give them a chance.
Maybe? Yeah, I don't know.
I just think that to give them a chance, they got to keep them around 20. If they don't keep them around 20 and it goes into the 28 and 34, and I think that's going to be hard for them to overcome. Defense has to slow up that offense.
Yeah, I mean, the Commanders' defense been kind of solid here through the backstretch, but Commanders, Dan Quinn in his first year has them playing good football. I want to say this now already. You know, in the NFC East, we never have repeat division winners.
Right.
Like Eagles never. Next year, Eagles won it this year. That means next year, I think it's going to be the Commanders. I think Commanders could be your division champs next year. Something to pay attention to. But big underdogs on the road. So we have our Final Four set in the NFC, Detroit and Washington. And then the Eagles taking on the winner of tonight's Monday Night Football game, which we will get you a preview to here. 8 o'clock kickoff tonight, not 8:20 here for the final game of Super Wild Card Weekend. Well, Matthew, coaching carousel also getting going here in the NFL. Cowboys, a week from not letting Mike McCarthy interview with other teams, including the Chicago Bears, they let him go today after not being able to come to an agreement on a length of a contract. So interesting stuff there. The Patriots fired Gerard Mayo after just 1 season, and they hire their former player and potential Hall of Famer Mike Vrabel, who was announced today, gave his introductory press conference. And that now leaves the Raiders, the Saints, the Bears, the Jets, the Jags, and the Cowboys as your coaching openings heading into next season. Matthew, thoughts on the Cowboys, the Patriots, and all this coaching carousel information here as of late? A lot of it obviously still to be determined as we progress into the offseason.
Yeah, so my problem with the Patriots' handling of Mayo is more to do with the culture of the NFL, because I think the problem I have with the culture of the NFL right now is you're putting a guy, you have a top 5 pick, which means your team is not very good. Talent-wise, because you're a top 5 team in the draft. And then you're then pairing them with a rookie QB. So they have to develop a rookie QB as well as inherit a roster that's devoid of exceptional talent. Because this isn't like the NBA lottery system where maybe a team that almost made the playoffs might be a top 5 pick based on the lottery balls. It's literally by order of win and loss. And then I heard people say, well, the reason why he got fired was because he won his last game and they needed to have a chance to get a pick. And my problem is this. If we're firing coaches for doing what we tell them to do, which is win, and you're telling me that he should have lost because that would have enabled them to have a higher draft pick, well then all the folks that criticize the NBA for doing a lottery system, it looks like the NBA might got it right then. It looks like the NBA saying, look, you guys are going to tank. We're gonna have lottery balls, and you don't really know who's going to go where. So we're firing. So either way, it's a dirty game, because if you're firing Mayo for the record, I don't know, and I've seen this with other coaches too. I don't know how much you can really evaluate him and say if he's a good coach or a bad coach based on the inherited mess. I don't understand that. And then if you're firing him because of the fact he cost the team a higher draft pick because they won the last game of the season, that doesn't make sense to me either. And then that leads me to the last final dirty piece of the whole thing is if they fired Mayo if they hired Mayo for the idea that he was essentially going to be a placeholder for Vrabel, so that Vrabel gets to be refreshed and anew when he comes in, and then Mayo takes these losses, Mayo takes the hit, he gets fired, you bring in Vrabel. It's obvious they wanted Vrabel. really didn't waste a whole lot of time. They had some of the embarrassing Rooney Rule, guys that come in. And I got to be honest, the NFL, at this point, it's looking pitiful. These teams already know who they want. I get what the Rooney Rule was intended for, but at this point, it just looks like a joke. They just make it a joke. And because those guys don't have a shot to really get those positions, and the organization already has an idea with who they're going with. But enough of that. At the end of the day, the problem I have with a lot of these firings is, like Mike McCarthy, the Cowboys, how much more do you need? You know that this guy is who he is. Why do you need to take all this time to figure out if you want him or not? You already know. And then with the whole, all these other ones, it's like, okay, you're firing guys because they didn't do well. I get it. It's a performance job, but at the end of the day, man, it's like, look, you can't tell me you don't know that these guys are lemons. Like, you knew there was lemons. You knew they were placeholders. So stop trying to make the process complicated and seem like it's more scientific-y than what it is. You already know who you were going with. Just say it.
Yeah, and Jerry does this. I mean, he's starting to get a little bit ridiculous. I've always liked how entertaining he's been over the years. But, I mean, come on, right? You deny the man an interview last week with the Chicago Bears. I mean, to come out and say, no, we're not letting him interview with another team, and then to fire him a week later is just, disrespectful. It's not right. It's something you don't see in the coaching. It's against what they call the coaching, etiquette in the NFL. That's just not something that you're supposed to do. Jerry just loves to turn everything into a big show, right? He just loves to talk about, all year we heard about the Dak and CD deals. He wanted to be on camera. He wanted to talk about everything. All year he's been talking about Mike McCarthy and how he thought, hey, if we want him back, he wants to come back. A week before he denied the interview, he did an interview after the game, and he said, hey, Mike McCarthy somebody asked him, Mike McCarthy might get some interview opportunities for another team, and he said, hey, absolutely. He said, the worst thing is for him not to want to be here, and to have that in the building is not good. We want him to go interview with other teams. We want him to see where he wants to be. And then they deny him the chance to interview with the Bears. It just doesn't make any sense. It is ridiculous. And I know Brandon Graham was on ESPN last weekend, and he said, in Philadelphia, they would love for Mike McCarthy to come back to Dallas. But obviously, that's not going to be the case. And again, I'm not a big Mike McCarthy fan. A good coach that over the year, 12 wins, I think 3 straight seasons, a Super Bowl with Green Bay. I'm not the biggest fan of Mike McCarthy, but he does have a decent resume. And again, just to kick him out the door like that, to treat him like that there to Jerry. And we'll see if he gets another opportunity or another job next year. And now, who do the Cowboys go get? And to your point on the Patriots, I think as soon as they heard Mike Vrabel, I think that's when they kind of made that decision. Right. Last year, they hired Mayo on January 12th. Vrabel was fired on the 9th. So I don't think that was enough time for them to kind of scramble and get him the deal last year, because apparently Mayo's been the guy that they've had in waiting for 5 or 6 years now, right?
Exactly.
And so something obviously drastically changed there, and Vrabel came up, and as soon as they saw him interview with the Jets 2 weeks ago, I think that had Robert Kraft and the Patriots a little worried and upset about that. And as soon as they heard that, they brought him right in and got this deal done. So he's the first hire of this new coaching process.
And I got to be honest with you. I'm a San Francisco fan. We don't like Dallas either.
Yeah.
I love that Dallas is this bad. Because I grew up in a time in which
I know, right? Yep.
Dallas they knew what they were doing. You knew that your team's free agent was possibly going to be theirs.
Yeah.
And they were one of the premier guys, and you knew it was going to happen. And now to see that the mess it's become, it's like,
Man, what a disaster.
Yeah,
it really is.
It's
fantastic, though. It is. You got to love it. For years, we'll take it. Hopefully, it keeps continuing. Again, a shout out to the Dallas Cowboys. One of the most talented rosters in the NFL.
Easily.
But just can't seem to get it done each and every year. This year, obviously, Dak, CD was banged up. The defense just was not what it was last year. If they can get back to that next year, maybe they'll have a chance. But not looking good in Dallas as of right now. But again, we'll see who their head coach is here in a little bit, or a short time down the road. Well, Matthew, anything else here in the NFL before we dive into Monday Night Football and our preview for tonight's game? Anything over the weekend or as we look ahead that you're excited for? We got the Bills and the Ravens coming up next week. That's probably the biggest game, in my opinion, your Final Four in the AFC, Bills versus the Ravens, the Chiefs and the Texans. And then you look over in the NFC, obviously with the Eagles taking on the winner of the Rams and Vikings tonight, and then the Lions and the Commanders there in the NFC.
So I watched the Bills and Broncos game, and I got to be honest with you. I don't get the Sean Payton love. Like, I mean, this is a guy that has gone through his career with these badges of genius, and he's an offensive guru, and he's a quarterback whisperer. And look, I was one of the guys that did not like Bo Nix coming out of college.
Yeah,
I own that.
Me
He
too.
has totally done well. He's done far better than I thought.
Especially early.
I don't think that is Sean Payton. I think that's Bo Nix because I've seen what Sean Payton has done with other quarterbacks. Bo Nix is an unusual situation, much like, and it's kind of interesting because watching Josh Allen and watching Bo Nix kind of reminds me in some regards of each other because Josh Allen coming at Wyoming, none of us knew that he could run like he does.
Yeah.
And Bo Nix did not get any of that real credit in the evaluation process of being able to create and extend
Mobile,
plays.
but not a run. Can extend plays, but not he ran
Correct.
the ball phenomenal this year.
Yeah, ran the ball phenomenal this year. So my hat's off to them, and that's not something that Sean Payton does. But let me just say this too. And I get the trick play thing. So it was 7-10, and there was a fourth down, and before halftime, Broncos did a special teams fake. They got the pass. They got it. And I got to be honest with you. In that scenario, you've let me know on the other team, you guys don't have any faith. Because you just did a trick play with us close to halftime. So you obviously don't have a lot of faith in your offense. That's what it tells me. And they didn't even get a field goal out of it. They didn't get any points.
Unanswered after that.
And then that was it. It was dead.
And just to go back to, I'm watching the game first. The Broncos get the ball first,
Right.
And I coming into the game, I had the Bills just to win, but I didn't like, the 8.5 points had me a little
Right.
skeptical. Wish I would have taken
Right,
looking back on
right.
it now. But coming in that first touchdown, a bomb to
Yeah.
Denzel Mims, what we saw the last few weeks, and you're thinking, man,
Yep.
a lot of people gave the Broncos a chance this week.
Right.
They really did. I didn't think they were going to win the game, but I thought maybe they could keep it relatively close.
Right.
7-0. I'm thinking, man, what do we got here? I said, maybe
Right.
maybe we got a game here.
Right.
31 unanswered. I mean, this was a bully game.
It was a bully
the
game,
Bills
man.
used 6 offensive linemen. They brought in 2 more offense, and they just ran the ball right down their throat. Again, Denver, known for their pass rush, led the league in sacks this year. They got quick guys off the edge, but they were not built to stop the power game.
No.
And there was just 5 or 6, linemen with a tight end, and they were just pounding James Cook.
ridiculous.
I mean, they just drove it down their throat the rest of the game. And again, that's what has me excited about the Bills this year. Obviously, a big Josh Allen guy for them. But they finally, seems with Joe Brady, have found an identity on offense where they can we talked about it all year last year, they can run the football.
Yeah.
With James Cook and this offensive line and the way that they've been able to do that, and the defense is looking good now, getting these guys back. Matt Milano's back, Bernard's back.
Yep.
I think they're primed. But again, and I want to talk about this and now make this into a deeper conversation with
Yeah.
Baltimore. Man, I'll tell you what, the AFC is looking strong to me this year. I think
Yeah.
Buffalo and Baltimore really have a chance to beat Kansas City this year. I
for sure.
I really do believe that.
For sure.
And I'm almost, and I don't want to say it because I won't doubt Mahomes. We sat here last year and I picked him every way in the playoffs, and he just obviously did what he did.
Right.
But these two teams are strong. I mean, the Bills and the Ravens have been phenomenal lately. I mean,
Yep.
on paper and from the eye test, they both have looked better than Kansas City has here down the stretch.
sure.
Wouldn't pick them again because it's Pat Mahomes on the other side. But who are you going with in this one? Bills, Ravens, both guys, your top 2 MVP candidates. The spread
Yep.
is a pick 'em.
Yep.
I mean, the Ravens beat the brakes off them earlier in the year. Buffalo,
They
though,
did.
was missing 6 defensive starters in that game, so
Yep.
a little bit of a difference there. But this is going to be my most anticipated game of the playoffs, except
sure.
for the Lions, Eagles, maybe on the other side of the NFC Championship. But I'm excited for this one. What do you see here in this big game here between the Ravens and the Bills?
I mean, I think this is basically decides who's the MVP.
It could, right? It's not supposed to.
It's
and
not
those
supposed
votes are
to.
supposed to be in there, but it could.
Right.
It really could.
I mean, I've loved what I've seen from Lamar this year, but I got to be honest with you. The way that Josh Allen has been playing, they both have limited weapons on the offensive side. I mean, he has Cook.
Yeah, me as Henry.
They have Henry. I actually like Isaiah Likely more than what's the kid?
Kincaid, yeah. And Andrews, too, on top of that.
Yeah, and I think Flowers is better than Shakir, but I look, it's almost a wash on some level. I really think either team could beat the Chiefs.
It's going to be a good game.
But I got to tell you, the biggest problem with the Chiefs, and it's always going to be the problem with the Chiefs, and look, I know everybody thinks I'm a Pat Mahomes homer, but I got to be honest with you. If I'm the Chiefs fans, there's something depressing about this year, because what I see is they're going to have to make a huge change offensively in this draft coming up and in future drafts, because I don't think they can continue down the path of having Mahomes bail them out, having the defense keep them in games. I don't think that that's sustainable for a long periods of time.
And it's starting to trend that way. I mean, we've seen this year the defense is not what it was last year. They're solid, but they're not even. Last year they were number 1, number 2 defense in the league, and that's what won them the Super Bowl. That defense won them the Super Bowl. This year they're not as good defensively, and the offense, you don't want to say isn't as good offensively, because the offense was poor last year when they won it. But it's not looking fantastic, and that's because a lot of the injuries. Obviously, Rashee Rice was a top receiver candidate before he went out early in the year. Obviously, Pacheco's comeback hasn't really been the same guy yet since. They'll see if they can get him going. But the biggest thing for me has been the offensive line for Kansas City. They have not been good. And we're seeing Patrick Mahomes pressured like we saw back when they lost the Super Bowl to the Bucs a few years ago. We haven't seen him pressured like that because they went out and they got those free agents after that year, and then they won 2 Super Bowls in a row because they bolstered that offensive line. Well, this year it hasn't been that way. They have given up pressures like crazy. Mahomes is getting sacked. He was banged up this year with the ankle and some other things. So that's what, again, when you got those guys on the outside on the edge like Houston has with Hunter and Anderson and Autry on the inside of defense, those guys can get after you. So they can cause problems there. And then you got some other teams in the AFC. Obviously, the Ravens can get there a little bit. The Bills, a little bit. But that's going to be the key to beating the Chiefs is, can you pressure Mahomes? That's the only way that he's able to lose in his career is when he's been pressured. We'll see if anybody can do it.
I think Kelsey's aged this year more than at tight end I can remember in a long time. Like, he does not have the same spring. And again, Father Time is undefeated, of course, and the tight end is a pretty brutal position, so like I get it. But I am kind of surprised he doesn't have the spring in the step. He doesn't explode as much on the field. He's more of a tight end who has great hands, but the ability to extend plays that made him special, he doesn't have that ability as much anymore. I mean, he still does it in parts, but he really doesn't have it the way that he used to. And I just think that's really, if we're being honest, I think that's the main focal point of why the offense. I mean, he's only got 3 touchdowns this year.
I mean, and again, you think about it, they don't have a lot of weapons. I think Xavier Worthy's really been better down the stretch. He's been great. Look for him to make an impact in the playoffs. But that's what I'm looking for in this first game, right? Can Kelsey have a signature playoff game? Because when they need someone to go to, he's been there every year. But like you said, this season during the regular season has been a little bit different. So what are we going to see on Saturday against the Texans? Is he going to be that guy that we're used to seeing, or is he not? Because if he's not, they could struggle offensively even against Houston. So we'll see what happens there down the stretch. Give me your pick for the Bills and the Ravens. Pick 'em game there.
I'm doing Bills.
Bills. This has been that's the one that's tough for me. I guess I can't go away from Josh Allen and the Bills, so I'm gonna go with the Bills too. But that is a toss-up for me with Lamar and the way that
it's definitely a toss-up. I mean, it could go either way.
I mean, that's I'm sure everybody in the world feels that way. But I'm gonna lean Bills too. Give it to the home team again. Just in this scenario, Chiefs, Texans. Will you rolling with the Chiefs?
I'm going Chiefs.
Chiefs again. Can you think they can cover the double digits there?
No.
I'm going to keep it close. Why not? Let's see the Chiefs, though, in a victory there. And then on the other side, you got the Eagles welcoming the winner. And maybe it does matter, in your opinion, tonight between the Rams and the Vikings. Has to make the trip out to Philly. Beat the Rams in Philly earlier this year. I don't believe it played Minnesota. Your thoughts on that game next weekend?
I don't think it really matters. I know people are saying the Vikings, I don't know. I just don't think the Vikings defense is good enough.
And we'll talk about, who wins that game tonight. But I'm with you. I think the Eagles got that next week regardless who it is. I think, whoever it comes to Philly could end up getting beat down in that game next week. And I don't usually say that. I'm more of a skeptical wait and see how it happens. But I think the Eagles are really playing well. And I think people from that, West Coast and Central coming over to Philadelphia, playing in that weather. Both of those teams are dome teams. So, again, going to be tough for them there. And then you got the Lions and the Commanders. Lions, big favorites in that one. I'm going Lions, obviously, versus the Eagles. But how do you see that game going? You think it's going to be all Lions? Do you think the Commanders can keep that one close?
No, I think the Midden Waiting is going to do his thing, man. Jared Goff, Midden Waiting. He's doing his thing, man.
That's right. And again, we'll have our NFC Championship or Championship game previews coming up next week as well. But let's get to the wild card tonight. Minnesota, the best number 5 seed in NFL history. 14-3 has never been done. And then the Rams 10-7. They get, though, the home game because they won their division. They played earlier in the year. The Rams actually won this game at home earlier in the season, and then the Vikings started to play a lot better, though, in the game. 2.5-point favorites. The Vikings are on the road, but that's the key, Matthew. This game's not on the road, really. It's at a neutral site. Because of the wildfires in LA, the game moved from SoFi Stadium to Glendale, Arizona, you know, the division rival of the Los Angeles Rams. They redid. All the seats are still red, but they got the blue on the field, so an interesting situation there. So not really a home game for the Rams, and they are 2.5-point underdogs here as the home team. What do you think? You think the Vikings can get this thing done tonight, or do you think the Rams as underdogs to get a victory and move on?
I think the Vikings are going to get it done. I think the biggest thing is going to be the rushing game for them. You know, I'm a big fan of Jones. I just think he's just tough. And I think Cam Akers might be one of the better third down guys that's in the league. So you got that. And then, of course, you got the marvelous one, Justin Jefferson. You know, you got Addison. I mean, they've got some weapons over there. And look, Sam Darnold.
I was going to say, I'm shocked you're going with the boys. Mr.
Scary
Mid, he's
moments,
a
man. Yeah, scary. Look, I'm not going to lie. Even though he's put up good numbers this year, he still goes through parts of the season where you're like, what are you throwing?
Well, last week, right? You go back to last week. That was basically a playoff game environment, right? Winner takes the division, gets it, you know, gets the bye. I mean, everything was online that game.
Yeah.
And they got beat up, right? Darnold, I mean, in the playoff environment, they got beat up. The Lions were able to get after him, push him off his spot. He looked like he did with the Jets, but at the same time, how many opportunities do you get as a team for a second chance at basically a playoff game, right? You go out there in that scenario and you drop the ball and you play horrible. What are the odds they do that again, you know, the week after? So this is a tough one for me. I think whoever wins, it'll be by a field goal. I think it's going to be late. I'm going to take the Rams just because I want the points as the team there, even though they're not at home. But I think the Vikings can win by 3. I think Rams can win by or less than 3 or less. I think it's going to be a close game all the way down the line. And like you said, there's a rare opportunity in the NFL when you have back-to-back chances to rebound like this in a playoff scenario. Last week they dropped it. What are the odds? I don't know if they're going to do it again. I don't know if they if they drop the ball again this week or tonight. So I think it's going to be a fantastic game, but I've been on the Rams. I'm going to stick with my guy Matt Stafford in that one and Puka Nacua. And again, some of those rookies and those young guys on defense, Jared Verse has been phenomenal. One of the guys I loved at Florida State off the edge.
That's a fact.
Yep. So let's see maybe if he can cause some havoc on Darnold, because we saw what the Lions did with that pass rush. They were playing man coverage on the back, and they brought everybody. And let's see what the Rams have dialed up here in this one tonight. I'm going to lean on the Rams. Matthew's taking the Vikings. Dennis, who do you got? Minnesota. So going with the Vikings as well. Again, the best number 5 seed in NFL history. Going to be a fun one here tonight. Again, Rams 2.5-point dogs at home, if you will, but the game not in LA.
No.
So Matthew, we're going to wrap it up here tonight. 7:30 here on the East Coast. Playoff game coming up at 8 o'clock on ESPN. Closing words here after we're through Super Wildcard Weekend. We talked a little bit about the coaching cycle. You know, the NBA kind of we'll get into in about a month. We're really going to dive in deeper into that here going down the stretch and into the summer here after the Super Bowl. But you're just closing thoughts here on Monday, our first show of 2025. Great to be back in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, my closing thoughts really center around the NBA. I think the NBA is in trouble. I think they've got an identity crisis. And I think for the first time in its history, we don't have a North American star that's ready to take the mantle from the old guard. You know, we had Magic Johnson, you had Larry Bird, then you had, you know, Michael, you had Dr. J. You know, you had Shaquille, you had Kobe, you had LeBron. This is the first time I can remember in which, if we say who's the best 24 and under North American, it gets sketchy really fast. And you know, I think that's why Anthony Edwards is so beloved. And look, John Morant still has a chance as well.
You got Ja, that's what I was going to throw in there.
But really, that's it. There's not a lot of other guys that draw the excitement and what fans love with the attitude and everything else. It's scary. And I think, you know, the NBA put all their hopes and dreams in the proverbial global box.
Yeah, they do.
And what they didn't understand is, and look, hockey people will understand this. You can put as many foreign players as you want to. Getting the North American market to cheer for them to the same fervor that they do for the North American player, it's going to be hard.
And I'm just for a second, I think the same thing. Baseball was down all those years, and it was the same exact situation. There wasn't a lot of those guys that you had on your baseball teams that you would know or see. And I agree. Just sorry to interrupt you there, but yeah.
No, I just think that's the issue. I mean, because whether we like it or not, we need the NCAA. We need high school basketball. We fall in love with these players. We follow these players. We did like Cooper Flag, for example.
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. You know, he went to Monterey. Shout out to Robert White from Wilmington. That's at
That's
Baylor.
right, yeah.
Same high school. Phenomenal career at Monterey Academy. Then he goes to Duke. He's done very well. I think he's going to be an exciting #1 pick. I think he's probably the favorite for it. And then you have Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey. They're at Rutgers playing phenomenal together. You need that. Telling the average fan in North America that, hey, you got to be excited about the guy that plays over for Partizan in Serbia or, Le Mans in France. It's like, bro, I don't understand that. I don't know about that. So it's like, I think the NBA has to start understanding that American fandom requires a connection and they require a certain play style. We like aggressive dunks. We like physicality in our game. And I think that the NBA has to start to remember that that's where the bread and butter of the game has gone. And you can make changes. I think the NFL has been brilliant about that, right? The NFL went, I think if you look at the passing attempts, I think it's about around 30 since the 80s. So since the 80s, even though the passing yards have gone up, the pass attempts are pretty relatively close. I think on average, your average quarterback throws, 4 more pass attempts than the guys in the 80s. In the NBA, the three-point shot is literally, we went from doing 6 in a whole game in the 90s to now, 50 or something like that, bro. I mean, this is like slinging Sammy Ball, who we mentioned up earlier, who was the inventor of the forward pass, and all of a sudden now we're like Pat Mahomes. It's like, bro, I don't even know what we're doing here. This is so the NBA's gotta understand that you can't just throw all this time and force people to, it's the three. Look, man, I don't think it's going to work long term.
Well, I think go back to your point, right? When you think about the superstars in the NBA, who's coming to play the Sixers, you're thinking about, who can I see, come play the Sixers? Luka Doncic, in the Mavericks, right. Victor Wembanyama in the Spurs, right? It's guys like Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets, and you're like, man, you're right. All the top superstars, obviously, from outside of the country lose so far, but you got your John Morant, your Anthony Edwards, but again, Ja's had his issues, right, for the last couple of years. Zion, who we thought might be the next big thing, he's had his issues, all off the court stuff for both of those guys, and right, nobody's been able to solidify themselves as the North American superstar here, because you see it all the time right on social media. It's going to be, we're going to wake up one day, we're going to have no LeBron, no Steph Curry, those guys, and that's coming soon. It is coming rapid. James Harden, from what we used to see, Mac. I mean, it's all going to be done soon. Yeah. And then you're right. Is it going to transition to maybe all of our superstars going to be from other countries? I mean, that's the way it's trending. And that's a good point that I hadn't thought about here recently, but a very interesting perspective there in the NBA. I'm excited here coming up for the game tonight between the Vikings and the Rams, and then next week going to have some great matchups on the slate as well. We will be back here on Monday to recap regular Wild Card weekend and to preview our conference championships coming up the week after that. So for Dennis, Matthew, and myself, thanks for tuning in. Our first show of 2025. A lot left in store for this year. I'm going to close out by saying, of course, happy 40th to our guy, Jason McCall. He will be hopefully back with us next weekend to talk a little bit about that Ravens-Bills game. He'll be happy. He'll be mad. We'll find out next Monday. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week here on DETV.